Welcome to the End of Course Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. In this live show, we are reviewing a professor who predicted that Trump would win the election in 2024. This was 2 years ago. He predicted that we would attack Iran, and now he's predicting that the U.S. will lose the war in Iran. I don't know why he's making that prediction, but he's been right the last two out of 3 times so far. So let's go ahead and check out the video and see why he's saying what he's saying.
All right, guys, we've got yet another heavy hitter guest and first-time guest on the show, Professor Jiang. He is the star of the popular YouTube channel Predictive History. He uses game theory to analyze past, current, and to predict future geopolitical events. And he joins us now. Professor, great to have you.
Good to see you, sir.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So, for people who aren't familiar with your work, I wanted to show folks that back in 2024, you made 3 big predictions. 1, that Trump would win. 2, that he would start a war with Iran. And 3, that the U.S. would lose that war. Let's take a listen to that.
In this class this semester, I'm making 3 big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is that the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change.
You, just you, building your app on base 44.
The global order.
So obviously that last one is the only one that has not yet come to fruition. Is quite a stunning prediction. Do you stand by it? And what have you seen so far that leads you to sort of stand firm in that conclusion?
So given my analysis of how the war is progressing, I think that Iran has many more advantages over the United States. The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran. And the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great Satan. They've had many practice runs. Last June was a 12-day war when the Iranians were able to examine and analyze the strike capacities of both the Israelis and the Americans. And they've had a lot of time, 8 months, to prepare fully for this new attack. They, through their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Shia militias, have been able to really grasp the American mentality. And now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. And not only are they striking GCC countries, American bases, they're going after the critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants, which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. In fact, the water desalination plants provides 60% of the GCC's water supply. So if a drone, and these drones cost $50,000, if they wiped out a desalination plant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it's a city of 10 million people, right? They'd be out of water in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. And right now, the Iranians have de facto closed off the Strait of Hormuz, and the GCC gets 90% of its food from the Strait of Hormuz. So I know a lot of people are talking about the disruptions to the global economy, but right now, the Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil, and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So that's a dire situation that the Americans are facing right now.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, sir, an Amazon data center was literally hit in the UAE. And now, of course, big tech companies, which were looking at the UAE as a major potential data center investment hub with...
I missed something. I didn't catch that whole thing. That's a major statement he just made. So he's listing out all the reasons why he thinks the U.S. will lose the war, and he's listing out the advantages that he thinks Iran has.
Deep and abundant.
Very
back here.
If a drone, and these drones cost really grasp this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great, many more advantages over the United States. The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran. And the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great Satan. They've had many practice runs. Last June was a 12-day war when the Iranians were able to examine and analyze the strike capacities of both the Israelis and the Americans. And they've had a lot of time, 8 months, to prepare fully for this new attack. They, through their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Shia militias, have been able to really grasp the American mentality. And now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. And not only are they striking GCC countries, American bases, they're going after the critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants.
Ooh. Okay. So he's saying the first strategy that Iran has, that Iran has is to tackle all the GCC countries, the energy generating countries that essentially props up the U.S. Now, the U.S. backs his dollars by petrol, the amount of oil that's sold in the world. And his estimation is that Iran figures that the way they win this is to draw this war out. So the U.S. wants to be in and out from a strategical standpoint, like they did Maduro. They want to go in, to handle business, take out the guy, come out. Before you bat an eye, they've already done with their mission. It's almost as if they were never there. He's saying that's not Iran's strategy. Iran wants to drag this out. Why? Because what they're going to do is tactfully and tactically wipe out all the key allies of the U.S. in the Middle East, first by attacking all the income-generating commodities there, the oil. But he just brought another point that I didn't hear before. So he said, because Saudi Arabia and a lot of these Gulf states are sort of desert type countries, they use these things called desalination plants. And that's essentially where they run pipes to the ocean. Then they use this desalination to extract the salt out of the pipes, out of the water, filtrate the water, and then distribute it to their folks to grow their crops, to have drinking water, to have bathing water. So what he's saying is these guys are not just going to attack the oil. They're going to attack the very livelihood of these plants that essentially provides them access to the water, to having drinkable water. I've never heard that strategy before. I've never even heard that mentioned. But if what he's saying is true, that is a weak point, which probably explains why Saudi Arabia said they're declared war against Iran, and now they're going after Iran before Iran takes these measures against them, because their livelihood lies on this. So now if you have a situation where it's a standoff, the oil is being attacked, the plants are being diminished, they now have no sources of water. They may potentially turn on the U.S. for that amount of pressure being applied to their people. So in that case, then you add on the fact that they're now attacking the Strait of Hormuz, which allows a lot of oil to flow through, food to flow through. It's a major shipping strait that distributes food, oil, and all sorts of products throughout the world. Now you're causing inflation. Now you're raising the cost of oil. And now you're causing pain points that is not just going to be felt by the US, but it's going to be felt by everyone in the world. So that anger is going to add further pressure to the US. The anger of the citizens are going to add further pressure to the US and to its leaders. And it's going to shift the tide of political will, right? People is with Trump as long as he's doing something they want. Now, once you start to squeeze more than they've already been squeezed, then they're going to go back to the original question. Why did we get ourselves involved in this, and who brought us into this space? And that's where the danger lies. So this is a brand new theory. I didn't hear this theory. This is a good one, though. This is a very good one.
Which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. In fact, the water desalination plant provides 60% of the GCC's water supply. So if a drone, and these drones cost $50,000, if they wiped out a desalination plant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it's a city of 10 million people, right? They'd be out of water in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. And right now, the Iranians have de facto closed off the Strait of Hormuz, and the GCC gets 90% of its food from the Strait of Hormuz. So I know a lot of people are talking about the disruptions to the global economy, but right now, the Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil, and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So that's a dire situation that the Americans are facing right now.
Okay, I wasn't aware that the American economy is propped up by the AI economy. Well, that's what he's saying, AI and data centers. So I never drew the connection between the success of the American economy and the AI data centers. Well, I guess that's why it's so pivotal for Trump to have access to the minerals. If you're propping all your future strength of your economy on the AI and the data centers, and you need to get a leading edge on that, then you need to have the minerals necessary to have the electricity to prop that up. So you start to see Trump is making strategic moves to secure minerals all over the world. Ukraine, he did a deal with Ukraine. He's doing deals in Africa. He's doing deals all over the place to secure minerals, because what he's saying must be true, in that we are staking a lot of our future value on the AI, the well-being of the AI market. Now, if that is true, we need financial backers, because we're 30 trillion into debt. We really don't have the spare cash to just plop into this. But all these Middle Eastern countries, the Qatars, the Saudi Arabias, the UAEs, they have the money. Now, that money that they have, they're now essentially partnered with us to invest in the AI and the data centers that's being built all over, because everyone sees that as the future wealth pot for the whole world. Whoever dominates that space will ultimately dominate the economies to come. And you see a lot of policy that's leading towards this digital dollar, all these things that allows control. But for that to happen, they have to have the data centers that can facilitate a global amassing of all this data. So this is a great point that Professor Jiang raised up, because I had never even thought of this. So there's a lot of emphasis on these AI data centers. So now Iran's calculation, according to Professor Jiang, is that if we tackle what they deem as their future, we don't necessarily have to fire bullets at them to hurt them on a deeper level. So what they're doing is they're strategically attacking these areas to potentially hurt us, bring us to our knees. How? They're attacking our backers. So that's what he's saying. You see a lot of bombs right now going from Iran, more so towards these neighboring states. And you're like, why? I mean, the US is the one who's attacking. You would think they would attack them there or more directly. They're attacking military bases, but they're equally attacking key infrastructure pieces all over, because they want to cause this pain point. They want to hurt, obviously the GDP of all these countries that's backing these AI data centers. They want to hurt, obviously, the production that brings in the money for those places or for those countries to back us. And then also what they're doing is they're now trying to essentially starve, essentially bring these people to a point of extinction, which is different, because I wouldn't think Israel and the US attacked these guys. But most of their focus so far has been, obviously they're bombing Israel, but they're focusing on attacking all these other people who didn't attack them. And one would ask, okay, yeah, you're mad, but why are you going after them so hard or so fervently? This explains that. It's all part of the strategy to bring the US to its knees. So what their estimation is, the time it's going to take for you to reamp and restock all the ammunition you need to stop these missiles from going into all these neighboring countries. One, it's going to cause you to obviously exert through your stockpile, which is weakening your ability to keep up the fight, because now you don't have much supply to stop the plethora of missiles that's going in and out. So which is why you see as a point of strategy, Israel and the US are attacking these launch pads where they're launching the missiles from. They're trying to get that done quickly, as quick as possible. Because as long as these guys can keep firing these missiles, right, it's making it harder for them to defend against the missiles. And, right, it potentially creates more damage to the neighboring countries that they need on board to prop up the viability of their economy. Professor Jiang is killing it. This is a good analysis so far.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, sir, an Amazon data center was literally hit in the UAE. And now, of course, big tech companies, which were looking at the UAE as a major potential data center investment hub with cheap and abundant energy, probably going to be rethinking that. We also wanted to talk to you about munitions. We can put this next one up here on the screen. The United States is racing to accomplish Iran mission before munitions run out. This is specifically around interceptor math. There's a famous video just from yesterday in Israel, which shows a single Iranian ballistic missile, which is being targeted by some 11 different interceptors, all of which miss. Most of those come from the United States, not to mention all of the different bases, the GCC countries that you just talked about, and the asymmetry of the cost. It's $1 million for a missile, tens of millions per interceptor in some of these cases. With these munitions running out, how does that change the global picture? So you're in China, obviously, much of the stocks in Asia of the United States are likely to have to be cannibalized if this were to go on. How's that going to affect the global picture here?
Right. So my first point is that the United States military is not designed to fight a 21st century war. Remember, the military-industrial complex came to being after World War II, and it was designed to fight the Cold War. And the Cold War was really about muscle flexing, about who was able to send people up into space, who was the first to get the person on the moon, who had the more complex missile systems. And so the entire American military strategy revolves around very sophisticated technology that costs a lot of money to build. And that's what the American air defense system is basically. And that's why we're seeing this asymmetry, as you point out, in this war, where you have these $1 million missiles trying to take out these $50,000 drones. And it's not sustainable in the long term. And so what we're seeing is really the puncturing of the aura of invincibility and inevitability that sustained American hegemony for the past 20 years, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is really a reordering of not just the global economy, because this signals the collapse of the petrodollar, and with it, the entire US dollar-based reserve currency system, but also the global hegemony of the United States. We're moving towards a multipolar world.
Professor.
Wow, he raised another good point. He's saying that the U.S., I guess, was designed to function during the Cold War with Russia, and a lot of the missiles that was developed with that war and that opponent in mind, and with the infusion of military drones that can now cause a lot of damage. He's saying that if we've developed a missile for $1 million to destroy a drone for $50,000, there's a huge cost disparity between the two. And the $50,000 drone, there's a lot more of those that can be produced and deployed. And if it takes you $1 million to build something to destroy something for $50,000, you see the cost disparity here. And it's either going to result in you no longer producing the ammunition to stop that $50,000 drone and finding another way, which I think I saw something that said that Israel had like these laser things that can insinuate, it could literally blow the drone out of the sky. It just heats it up and blows it up before it hits. That might be the cost-effective solution. Maybe if they potentially scale that particular solution more, then it solves the problem that the professor raises. But he's saying if it costs you $1 million to produce a missile to that was originally intended to kill another $1 million type of missile from hitting us, but now you're using that $1 million missile to destroy a $50,000 drone, it's going to cost a lot more millions, especially since they have a lot more drones to essentially pick off. So he's saying from a cost standpoint, it's not going to make sense. So we're going to run out of ammunition to deter Iran faster than it's going to take for them to run out of ammunition on their end. Which I think this is why it's very strategic and tactical, why you see there's a huge focus on killing these little hub points where they're launching these missiles from. This is an interesting point.
This morning, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was asked a question about potential ground troops in Iran. He refused to rule out that possibility. And he said, oh, well, we're not going to project to you what we will or will not do, but we don't want to, rule anything out. We will do what it takes. Do you think that America will end up invading Iran from the ground, since it's already becoming relatively clear they won't be able to accomplish the goal of regime change or even regime collapse using just air power alone?
Right. So everyone says that the worst calamity that could happen in the United States is if it were to send ground troops into Iran. At the same time, the United States are committed to regime change in Iran. We've never had a precedent in history where you were able to regime change from the air alone. You need ground troops. And so unfortunately, what's going to happen over the next few months is that pressure will build on America to send ground troops, especially from the GCC countries and from Israel, which are being pounded right now by the Iranians. So remember that if the GCC countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, if they go, then the petrodollar goes with them. So the Americans need to protect these countries, and these countries are going to demand that either the Americans bribe the Iranians to cease, and this is like $5 trillion in indemnity, okay? Mm-hmm. Or send ground troops to wipe out the Iranian threat once and for all. And I know that there's no political will for ground troops to be used against Iran among the American people. But remember that 78% of American people was against initial strikes against Iran in the first place.
Right. And one of the things that really comes into question, I think, with all of this, sir, when we're looking at the geopolitical picture.
That's the next thing that he raised. Another good point. So again, Trump went in and was able to execute the Maduro plan without a lot of major ground troops. He was able to go in. There wasn't much of a fight. Iran's a whole different animal, like 100 million people, massive country, a lot of ground to cover. It's mountainous terrains, it's different aspects to it. And this is the Persian Empire, for heaven's sakes. These people are battle tested. Let's be honest. They're not, hanging around because they're weak. So for the U.S. to be able to execute regime change, which is what seems to be the goal here, they're going to have to put boots on the ground. The question is that a political killer for Trump if he is having to tell the American people, without even a full declaration of war, that he needs to disperse American troops to go die to change the regime? I don't know. I don't know how popular that's going to be. I think that might be a uphill battle for him. Now you have the people that love him, but part of the reason they voted for him is because he didn't want to start wars outside. He wanted to be America first. So that was sort of his selling point to the American people. For him to go back to them and say, here's why we need to start investing in a military campaign, I think is going to be tough. And it's going to definitely make his voters feel alienated potentially. And they may not support him because there are voices, prominent voices, speaking against him doing that. And ground troops means the high probability of a lot more American lives lost. That's going to be a tough conversation to have. I personally don't think Trump has the appetite to do that. I think he would rather just bomb the heck out of these people, call it a wrap, and walk away, or potentially convince some of the neighboring states, Arab states, to be the ones putting the boots on the ground and will provide tactical support and things of that nature That way he can at least say there's no Americans' lives lost. We took care of what we deem to be a major threat to the world. Like, these are all political talking points that he can use to justify what he's doing. But according to Professor Jiang, he wouldn't have done this if he didn't want to fully execute this regime change, which means change the whole ideology of how that country's run. And if he's going to do that, that's a much bigger campaign with a country that's not Iraq. That country is 3 times the size of Iraq. And it took us 20 years. And I still don't know what we accomplished in Iraq. They're 3 times the size of Iraq. And in terms of fighting capacity and might, I think they're definitely more powerful. So this is not like a walk in the park. So imagine if it took us 20 years to barely scratch the surface with Iraq. Is it going to take us 60 years to potentially, execute a stable situation over there? One never knows. I don't know. This professor is saying in order for that to happen, they still have to put boots on the ground. I don't know if that's going to be what we ultimately do. Maybe Trump has a trump card, something that he's going to pull out of his pocket that nobody knows. I wouldn't put anything past him. I would think that they've done a lot of deliberation to make the decisions they did to go in. But according to this guy and how he's analyzing it in terms of how he's predicting why he thinks the U.S. may not win this, these are factors that pose as weak points for us going into that.
The sacrificing in much of this from the United States on behalf of Israel is kind of a question as to who and what wanted this. We were actually curious for your view on a disputed report here from the Washington Post. We can put it up here on the screen, F3. A push from the Saudis. Israel helped move Trump to attack Iran. Now, this has been internally disputed by Saudi Arabia, saying that they did not push the Trump administration to attack Iran. However, this is clearly an authorized leak from our own government, trying to at least lay some of the blame on behalf of the GCC. What do you make of this analysis and of this narrative that Saudi Arabia was also trying to be behind this push to bomb Iran?
So I've always argued that both Saudi Arabia and Israel are heavily invested in regime change in Iran. In fact, Saudi Arabia sees Iran as much more of an existential crisis than Israel. Because remember, Israel still has nuclear weapons, and Israel is a very diverse, very sophisticated economy, whereas Saudi Arabia is completely reliant on oil. And it's always had problems with Iran because Iran is a theocracy opposed to the Saudi monarchy. Iran funds and equips the Houthis, which have been antagonistic towards Saudi Arabia for the longest time. And right now, the Saudi economy is suffering. It's been trying to pivot towards more of a tourist economy. That's why they brought in Ronaldo. That's why they're switching to e-gaming. That's why they're building something called a line, NEOM. And all these things are not working out. So they need to be able to control the oil resources of the entire Middle East if they are to survive and thrive as a nation. So I do believe that this reporting is credible, even though it does make Saudi Arabia look bad. But remember, Saudi Arabia says that they wanted peace, but they are helping the Israelis and the Americans attack Iran right now because they're allowing the Israelis and Americans to use Saudi airspace.
So help us understand, because it still feels to me like there are some pieces that don't totally add up. You had, in advance of this war on Iran, you had top military brass up to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying, this is a really bad idea. We are not ready for this. All the math on the interceptors that's been talked about for months at this point. And yet Trump still decided to go ahead.
Brian is the best content marketing team lead I've ever worked with. But before he created his content calendar using Monday.com, his strategy.
What is the calculus that he was making here that led him to take what already appears to be catastrophic actions?
Right. Okay. So this is the key question. Why do they do this? I think there are 3 possibilities. Okay. And I think all 3 possibilities are valid. The first is that of hubris. you look at history, this is how empires behave. So the Mindoro kidnapping was quick, successful, and it was adrenaline rush for Trump. And that made him overconfident in the capacity of the American military. Okay, so hubris is a factor, and we see this throughout history. Why did Hitler invade Stalin? Because he conquered Europe really easily, and he thought it was invincible, right?
It's a great point. So pretty much said differently, ego. You take out Maduro quickly, you thought you can go in and do the same thing with a much bigger country. That's what I'm hearing.
And then that led to the destruction of the German army in the Soviet Union. So hubris is a factor. Then you have to look at internal political calculus, where even though America does not benefit from this war against Iran, Trump himself personally benefits. Why? Because the Saudis and Israelis are bribing him to attack Iran. Remember that the Saudis invested $2 billion in the private equity fund of Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Donald Trump. And the Israelis, through Miriam Adelson, have been financing Trump's political career, right? So Miriam Adelson, a few months back, said that she will put up $250 million if Trump were to run a third term. So Trump is getting a lot of financial and political support from the Saudis and Israelis. Also remember that if this war goes sideways and Trump is forced to use ground troops, he will probably get approval from Congress, and this will give him emergency war powers, which will allow him to influence the midterms. So Trump is thinking about a third term. And I think at the ballot box, he probably won't get it. But if there's a war going on and you can delay elections and you have emergency war powers and people rally around the flag, then he probably will get a third term.
Wow. Wow. It's a new theory. Went over my head. I was not thinking like that. He's saying, besides the fact that Trump has hubris, his ego, he thought, hey, I can do this. I can take out the Maduro regime quickly. Our military power is strong. Nobody can mess with us. And Trump does brag about that a lot because we spend a lot of money on the military. But we also spend a lot of money on education, and we're not exactly ranked high there. So spending a lot of money on something doesn't necessarily mean you're the best at it. Although I would say we have a pretty formidable military. But this man just raised the point that if he is in war, then he can potentially extend his term, which is something he's highly interested in. That does make a point. There may have been something that went into the calculus. Hey, if you're at war, you have emergency powers through the military and stuff like that. If you have, through Congress may grant that to you. You could change when elections happen because you're at war. You see, what's his name doing this right now? Zelensky's doing this right now. Russia's saying he's not even a legitimate leader because there hasn't been an election, but because he's in war, there's a different set of rules that gets to apply. So could it be that Trump maybe saw this as an opportunity to stay in office a little longer? They do say power is intoxicating. I don't know. It's this guy's theory though. One that seems valid.
And the last factor that is very important is the eschatological factor, where if you look at the Epstein files, it's clear that we are run by secret societies. It's clear that the world is run by these individuals who have a lot of power. We don't know who they are, but they control the military. They control the national security apparatus. And these people, there are different names for these people. You can call them the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are composed of three major groups, okay? You have the Jesuits, who control the Vatican. You have the Sephardim Frankists, which control the modern state of Israel today. You have the Freemasons, which control the national security apparatus of the United States. And they believe that Israel, this war in the Middle East, is key to the end times in creating heaven on earth. So it's almost like a script that they're following, even though it doesn't make any geopolitical sense. Okay, so I would say that these three are the best reasons why this is happening.
Wow, I couldn't even believe he said that last part. So this goes all back to biblical prophecies. So he's saying he believes that there's the third element is these mystery leaders who are all part of the whole, he said, of the Illuminati. He says you got people who's kind of pulling strings, the people who controls the Vatican, the people who controls the Jewish over there, and then also the Freemasons here who controls the military apparatus. A lot of these things went right over my head, guys. So if you're confused or if you're taken aback by some of this guy's theories, I am too. But I thought there were some valid points. A lot of what he says makes sense and maybe helps people to get a bigger picture as to why we are where we are. But it is an interesting analysis done by Professor Jiang. I think his point of fame has been that he's predicted a lot of things using certain models, and this is the model he's using to predict what will happen next. I don't know. There's a marketplace where you can bet on what future events will take place next. So if anybody's a betting man and they want to go after this guy's bet, obviously that's not a bet I'd want to place, because I don't want to see the U.S. lose a war, or I don't want to see the U.S. really kind of entangled. So let's hope this guy is now right with the assessments that he made. But that was Professor Jiang. I don't believe they have anything more in this video, so we're probably going to be wrapping up.
Well, sir, I hope you come back. This was very informative, I think, for both of us. We deeply appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Okay, so that was that video, guys. We got about 40 minutes in. I thought it was very informative. Wanted to share that with you. Obviously, I'm of the mindset, let's pray. Let's hope things don't get to a place where it's a breaking point. You know, the Bible encourages us to pray for our leaders so that we can live peaceable lives. I pray that Trump has the right people around him, that those people's voices gets heard, and that cooler heads prevail, and we don't find ourselves in a situation where this man's predictions has to come true. So that being said, what say you? I ask you to like and subscribe, stay connected to the Inner Core Show. If you're not already a subscribed member, I definitely want to get your feedback. But also that comment box is for you to share your thoughts, your point of view. Feel free to touch base, join the conversation. What do you think about this man's predictions? Do you think he made valid points? Do you have a whole different theory as to what may happen? Welcome the conversation. We'll definitely check those and respond accordingly. But until we speak again, I thank you guys, those of you who joined me for this live show. I'm trying to do more of these now because I think it's more personal. You know, for people who even want to comment, they certainly can. But I thank you guys for joining me for the show. And until we speak again, I pray that all is well for you and yours, and be well. All right.